David, what's up, brother?
Oh, not too much. How's it going?
Good. How's Cali life treating you?
It's interesting.
How'd you end up out there?
Yeah. A buddy of mine has a biotech company out here, and I'm helping him move it to Austin. So
I gotcha.
I'm out here helping out.
Nice.
He's kind of fed up with California.
Which I don't blame him, from what I hear.
Right. Yeah, I understand.
So, first off, congratulations on your Netflix appearance. That was cool.
It was. Thank you.
How'd that come about?
Well, that same buddy. We've been working together on some stuff for quite a while in the sort of genetic engineering space, and they actually approached him first. And so they approached him about it. He's got kind of a big name in the sort of genetic engineering space. And he was like, I'll tell you somebody you need to talk to, my friend down here in Mississippi. And so they contacted me. We talked. That's kind of how it all got started.
I gotcha. And for the listeners, that is Unnatural Selection on Netflix.
Unnatural Selection.
Yeah, it's
about my project to try and simplify dog genetic engineering. So the real interesting thing isn't the glowing, right? That's just a test gene. The real interesting thing is trying to use a technique called Sperm mediated gene transfer. Mm-hmm. So, normally when you're making a genetically modified something, you either collect an egg and modify the egg, or you collect an embryo and modify the embryo. Mm-hmm. But obviously you got to do like surgical extraction and reimplantation. And, it's only when I first started this project that had never, or at least canine in vitro fertilization had never been done successfully. So artificial insemination is easy. Everybody does that. But in vitro fertilization, where they have to make like a test tube puppy, it's been done in humans since the 70s, but hadn't been done in dogs until 2015. So I was already going by the time that had been done successfully ever, because dog embryos and eggs and sperm are just weird. Mm. And so when you're trying to keep them alive in a petri dish, you got to do things a lot differently. And so my thoughts were, there's another technique called sperm-mediated gene transfer that they've done on pigs and some other animals, cows, things like that, where you collect the sperm, modify the sperm instead of the egg, and then just do artificial insemination. The trouble is, it's still a chance because you don't modify all the sperm. You may want to modify, 1% of them, and then you have a litter, and only 1% of your litter is modified, right? Mm-hmm. But the benefit of that is, if you're trying to do something like, say, repair a genetic disease or improve a trait or transplant a trait that you just can't do otherwise. So if that works, you could just collect sperm, add DNA to it, let the DNA do what it's supposed to do, and then artificially inseminate, and then just start screening your puppies, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, the easiest way to screen a puppy is if you have a litter of 10 and one of them glows, then that one's the one.
Right.
So the glowing gene, the GFP gene, is actually really common. It's normally used for genetic engineering experiments like this, where you're trying out new protocols, because the real test with that is, can I get this thing that's been developed and worked in pigs to work in dogs? Because nobody's ever done it in dogs before. So that's the hard part. Mm-hmm. And like I said, dog sperm is weird. So trying to get it to work has presented some sort of unique challenges. But once it does, then it opens a lot of things. Because like artificial insemination is cheap and easy, and every dog breeder can do that. And you could do things like say you come up with a technique called CRISPR, which is a genetic engineering technique that allows you to make pretty precise changes to the genome, mm-hmm. not just dumping a gene in somewhere, but like, say, Dalmatians, the example I always use, have hyperuricemia, like almost all of them. And before they started crossbreeding them with pointers, they all had it. So how do you fix that? You either outcross, which they did in the 70s, and they still haven't managed to spread that gene to all of them yet. Or let's say you came up with a kit that you could give to a dog breeder that basically has one extra step. You select sperm, sort of add the sort of magic sauce that you don't even have to really understand how it works because all the design stuff's already been done for you. You just add that to the sperm, wait an hour, and then do the insemination. And then some of your puppies will come out with that broken gene fixed. And if you had thousands and thousands of breeders doing this, then in one generation, you could have thousands and thousands of healthy puppies born. So in 2 or 3 generations, you could completely eliminate a genetic disease that takes up 99% of the population.
Wow.
And if you could do that for every breed, you could eliminate hundreds of genetic diseases in the next 30 years.
That would definitely be a game changer.
Yeah. And then if you could isolate the genotype for certain traits, especially traits that aren't well studied, like color traits are easy. There's been enough genetic research on color traits that, we know how to make a blue dog and a merle dog and all these sorts of things. But, traits that are not well understood, like gameness or, prey drive, things like that, things that can make a better working dog. If you could screen your dogs for that, if you could put that gene where you want it to be, you could produce good working dogs that had the traits you wanted. And instead of spending 30 years carefully selecting generation after generation, trying to sort of wiggle your way towards a target, you could just say, I want this gene, this gene, this gene, this gene, this gene, and put it together in a couple of generations.
Wow. That's incredible. So let me ask you this. I've seen on your page the images of the rodents that were under UV light. So are you essentially saying that a dog could glow under a UV light?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
That is insane to me.
Yeah, and so basically they just have to make one protein, right? So you add one gene that makes one protein from jellyfish, green fluorescent protein, and that protein itself is fluorescent. So whenever you shine the light on the animal, it's in their tissues, so they'll fluoresce, they'll glow. Wow,
that's truly amazing. Like,
oh yeah, and that's old technology, really. Like making animals glow. That's like 1970s stuff or 1980s stuff. They've made everything glow. There's like some regulatory problems in the U.S. because the FDA considers them to be veterinary drugs, but there's lizards and frogs and fish, and like you can buy. There's something called a glowfish that you can go to PetSmart right now and buy. They're genetically engineered pet fish. They glow.
Right. Yeah, I've seen those.
And so it's basically exactly the same thing.
I gotcha. Yeah, that is insane. That is insane. When did you get involved in dogs, and what made you choose a working mastiff or a bandog?
Okay, so like a lot of people, I've been around dogs and dog breeding all my life. My family's been breeding dogs, not commercially, but for our own use, hunting dogs mostly for like 5 generations. But so I was raised around rearing puppies and stuff like that, so it always just kind of seemed like a natural thing to do. But specifically getting into working dogs, I was living in Jackson, Mississippi at the time, and 2 guys in ski masks with sawed-off shotguns tried to break in my house. And I was there, Luckily, it wasn't that late at night. It was like 9 o'clock. But, I had my shotgun, and they didn't want to be in a shotgun fight any more than I did, so they ran away. And I stayed up that night, just thinking, what would have happened? It was like my wife, my toddler, and my baby other than me. If I'd have been at the store at the time or anywhere at work, got called in something, they would have got in the house and it would have just been her and the kids.
Right.
And I was like, no, I need something that can be here when I can't be here. And I remembered my neighbors growing up had Neos. And they were terrifying. But this was a while back, so they were fast, they were agile, they were clean. And my brother actually got one of those dogs later on from a litter that my neighbors had. And she turned out to be deaf, so, we never bred her or anything, but she was still a great guard dog when she noticed you. I remember that kind of power and reliability. And I thought, okay, well, let's get us some Mastiffs that'll guard the house. And I started looking into Neos and realized they were a mess. And I was like, okay, I can't use one of these dogs. And so I guess, between, like, my family had always bred, it's like we never focused on purebred dogs. Like, we had beagles, but they were like beagle-ish. Like, they had some blue tick in them, and they had some, like, whatever worked in them. Mm-hmm. And so, we always tried to, like, at one point with our beagles, they started getting too tall, and so they were getting too fast and catching the rabbits and stuff like that. So we had to shorten them up and things like that. So I was like, okay, well, Neos have all these problems. Well, let's just fix it. Few generations of breeding, and I underestimated how difficult it would be. When 10th generation dog. Well, my newest puppy is 11th generation. So, it's a lot of generations of breeding. And I leaned on some other people's work as well, like Lee Robinson. He has a well-established bandog program, and I used some of his blood and some other blood that I found, some sort of lucky crosses, and I was lucky to get dogs like Achilles, which is my old Neo, and searched for good quality dogs that had the traits that I needed and put them together. I started selecting for the purpose I want, which is just a large, clean Mastiff that has prey drive and defense, confidence, good nerves, health, and something that's reliable around the family and can do the job when I'm not there. And then luckily other people wanted that too.
For sure. More of a fan of the bandog than anything else, actually. Not only for what it is, but just the possibilities that exist in the bandog.
Sure.
Now Lee Robinson has definitely been a great friend and a great mentor of mine as far as just educating, me on the bandog and things like that. And we've done like 5 interviews, and
nice.
Yeah, but I noticed his are more definitely towards the more game pit bull type,
side.
And you're more on the Mastiff end, and that's actually pretty cool. I was watching the sit down you guys did recently, and
nice.
comparing the Swinford to both sides, and I gotta say, I agree. It's right there in the middle between your two programs. More of a 50-50. Now,
it depends on what you're like, how you do the math in your head as far as like what's going to be the best for your situation.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I heard you say you used some blood from Lee's yard, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And was there any other pit bull or bull type that you threw in there?
Oh yeah. So there's multiple lines of game bred pit in there, and one entrance of American Bulldog.
Okay.
So and there's some weightful pit coming in from some other bandog type dogs that I used.
Larger
which I wouldn't have selected. Yeah, which I wouldn't have selected a bit like that, but the cross was so good, I'm happy with it. Like, and I actually, for years, kind of talked bad about the American Bulldog. There's no point in using an American Bulldog when the pit bull exists.
Right.
And then one day I met a dog named Domino, who was half American Bulldog, half Great Dane of all things. Phenomenal dog and great producer. He produced some extraordinary sons with the guy who had him, bred into a Corso. And I met both the dog and the bitch, and the Corso was terrible. And I did not like her, but her sons were great. And I just remember thinking, hey, if he'll produce like this with her, I would love to see what he'll produce with a good bitch. And so I bred him and produced Osiris and some of my best stock. So that's where the American Bulldog got into my program. But the Dane did a lot to balance out the negative traits of the American Bulldog.
Right.
And it was more of a Scott type anyway.
Okay, yeah, that was going to be my next question.
Which the guy told me it was a Scott. I suspect from looking at the dog, unless it just kind of got lucky, it was more of a Scott with a little bit of Johnson blood in there, or a Scott Johnson hybrid. But you know, you end up having to sort of go with what people tell you.
Right. I gotcha. Now, how many dogs do you have now?
Currently, not that many. I try to keep my yard pretty lean because I'm not a full-time breeder or anything. Let's see, I've got, I think 11. I'm actually trying to go down on that because I've got, I'm moving to Texas. So I'm trying to, I won't have my kennels and stuff there. So I've got to try and get really lean until I can get reset up. So,
I gotcha. What made you want to move to Texas?
I got a new job. So I've been working in the oil field in Mississippi, but, there's only so much you can do in the oil field. It's a good job, but it kind of limits what I can do. But in Texas, the job I'm getting is a biotech job. So it pays more, and it gives me the opportunity to do more with the genetic engineering side of things. I'll have access to more tools, equipment, supplies, people, and I think I can kind of accelerate that.
I gotcha.
Because I had to build a lab in my backyard, 8x12 shed. It's a fully functional genetic engineering lab. It's just only big enough for one person.
Right. How many litters do you usually have per year?
One or two.
One or two.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of litter. I've got 2 litters right now. First time I've ever had double litters, but that's because as I move, I don't think I'll have a litter the rest of the year.
Right.
Bring these 2 before I go.
I gotcha. So let me ask you this. There's a lot of heat surrounding Merle dogs. Me personally, I stay away from them because of the risks involved in, Merle to Merle, Merle to white. But to my understanding, certain people do have it down to a science. And what is your take on Merle? Because I've seen you have a couple dogs with Merle in them. I'm guessing that came from the Great Dane, right?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, there was a Harlequin Great Dane that was used at one point, and some of his offspring were Merle. And then like Osiris, with Osiris being Merle, that really ups the amount of Merle in my line because I used him a lot. Mm-hmm. And he's just an extraordinary dog. And so it made a lot of Merle, which does create the breeding problem of limiting your choices, right? You can't breed Merle to Merle. And the biggest thing is you just have to understand how it works. I've never seen a Merle have a problem that was a single Merle. Mm-hmm. There's talk of like cryptic Merles and, sort of hidden Merles and things like that, but I don't have the colors really, with the exception of maybe an extreme piebald, which I have occasionally because of the American Bulldog blood. To give me an issue with Merle. Like most of my dogs black and brown, and rarely even brown. Most of my dogs black, brindle, blue sometimes. But the Merle shows up on those because, there's a particular pigment that is affected by Merle. There's 2 pigments in dogs. Sort of the black-brown pigment and the sort of yellow-red pigment. And the yellow-red pigment isn't affected by Merle, but the black-brown pigment is. So as long as they have that pigment on their body somewhere, you should see Merle. So I've never had any issues with running into double Merles or anything like that. But Merle's always been a lower part of my program. Like, the way I see it, like for the Osiris, I wouldn't have selected against Osiris. You know, I don't care what color he is. He's just too good. And so him being Merle isn't enough of a complication, you know, for me to select against him. So, you know, I don't select on color, even against colors, unless, you know, it's just not worth it. Like if I had a black brother of his that was identical in every other way, sure. You know, it would be easier to have the black brother because then I could breed him without having to worry about, you know, what if I have some offspring 3 or 4 generations down that are like perfect for each other, but they're both Merles, you know?
Right.
But, you know, it's only a problem in that it limits your flexibility. But other than that, as far as like seeing health problems from it, that's only a problem if you make it that way.
I gotcha. Yeah, I just did a kind of a rant on YouTube to the American bully community. Because like I said, I respect those that know what they're doing, but you know, a lot of uneducated people get involved in popular breeds, and so immediately they'll, you know, when they realize, well, Merle makes the most money, the first thing a lot of these people want to do is grab 2 Merle dogs.
Right.
And
think they're going to make a bunch of Merle. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one thing. I don't charge differently for any of my dogs. They're all the same price.
Right.
So all my dogs are the same price, regardless male, female, pick order, color. None of that makes a difference.
I gotcha. What's the price on your pups?
$1,500. I'm a terrible salesman, so I don't like having to chase a lot of people and be like, hey, you know, let me make an ad and a video and, you know, Photoshop some dogs with flames and, you know, some ruins in the background and all this stuff. It's way too much work. You know, I'm here for the dogs, but the genetics and all that stuff, but the selling and interacting with people part of terrible at. So for me, you know, I just keep the price low, so I don't have to do a lot of that.
Yeah, I gotcha.
To move on along. And, you know, it feeds my dogs, so that's what I needed to do. But, yeah, and then you see the same thing with the Great Dane community. Like, you know, I can't tell you how many times I've seen Great Dane breeders that were, like, breeding 2 Harls together, and they'll have a litter of 6 Harlequins, you know? And it's like, where's the Merles? Where's the, you know, double Merles? Where's the other dogs that this pairing would produce? And they're like, oh, our line doesn't produce Merles. We don't have it. It's like, but you have Harlequin. So it's like, not only are you a liar, you're an idiot. So, you know, but like Harlequin is a modified Merle. And so if you breed 2 Harlequins together, you're breeding 2 Merles together.
Right.
So, you know, there's a way you could breed to make a large number of Harlequins without producing, well, you'd still produce Merles, but a large number of Harlequins in a litter, but you have to use a double Merle and a non-Merle. It'd be like a mantle to a double Merle, but one carrying Harl, one expressing Harl. You'd still get double Harls, which is lethal, but at least they wouldn't be born. They die in utero. So, right. I mean, it's still not right, but at least that's the only way that would be true. So, you know, there's uneducated breeders everywhere. And what bugs me is, like, the information's not hidden anymore.
Right.
You're a Google search away from learning all of this stuff.
Yeah. Honestly, like, that's why I started my channel in the first place, because people were walking around with, you know, 100-pound dogs that they were calling pit bulls. Yeah. Some of the stuff I see now is bizarre. I mean, their stomachs will be dragging the ground. I don't understand how they even got this to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's got to be dachshund blood in there somewhere, or something, you know, or corgi maybe.
Yeah, they're using a lot of Frenchie, English bulldog, pug, even. I heard that
the English bulldog and the pug are destroyed breeds.
Yeah, stick a fork in them.
Yeah. Yeah, the instance of hip dysplasia, according to the OFFA, is it's like 80-something% in English Bulldog, and then like 79% of the pug, something like that. Where in like a Great Dane, it's like 12%. You know, like you think about hip problems, you think, oh, it's a big dog thing. It's really not. It's a poorly bred dog thing. And, you know, you get dogs like a pug, which is, what's a pug weigh? Like 30 pounds?
Something like that. Yeah.
And they'll have terrible dysplastic hips, but you get like a 140-pound Dane with good hips, which admittedly, they have the best hips of the Mastiffs. And they owe that to the Greyhound blood. But, you know, still, it's like, they're just a mess. Like the list of genetic diseases in English Bulldog. And the worst thing is, to me, it's not just that they have these diseases. It's that most of the breeders are actively trying to enshrine them in the standards.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're supposed to be broken.
Right.
Which is terrible. I don't see how some of these people sleep at night. I actually did have one person say that a Dalmatian, if you'd used something like CRISPR to fix hyperuricemia in Dalmatians, they wouldn't be Dalmatians anymore. Because the genetic disease is part of the breed. So if you fix it, regardless of the fact that it'll remove suffering from the dogs, make them better, happier, healthier dogs, live longer, and reduce the burdens on the owner, regardless of all that, it's just part of them, and so it must be preserved. And I never understood the need to preserve the bad parts, you know?
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to preserve something about these dogs, let's preserve the great parts, not the things that the people who were breeding them at the time were trying to emulate, were trying to get rid of.
Right.
This all happened to the American Bulldog, like, between 17 and 1800s. The English Bulldogs in 17, 1800s. You can see it in the artwork. You can see it in preserved skulls, but the thing that gets me is there's no we didn't take that as a cautionary tale. Like, we should have been like, oh, well, let's never do that again. People are like, that's the way to go. I just don't get why anybody would look at that situation and think this was a vast improvement. We should emulate that.
Right.
I don't get how it gets to that point. Like, is there something like broken in the way we think about dogs? I think some of it has to do with like the super broad chests and the short squat faces and the sort of round heads and stuff like that. You know, we've got this idea that like they need to look like primates. You know,
mm-hmm.
like you know, you think about a man who's big and scary. You know, he's got broad jaw and he's got wide shoulders and stuff like that. But like, you know, the front legs on the dog, while they're still technically shoulders, they're more like the hips on a man than the shoulders on a man. Mm-hmm. Like, having super broad chest doesn't make you stronger, you know, in a fight. Right. You know, it would be like having a man with super wide hips. Just makes you slower. You know? Right,
yeah. So that makes sense.
That's why I always look to sort of natural shapes as a guide, because, you know, nobody calls like nature. And, you know, big cats, wild canines, they follow similar patterns, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, you never see underbites, you never see really smashed faces, you never see, you know, things that are wider than they are tall. And, you know, so a lot of these distortions that we create just never occur in nature because it doesn't work. And that should be a big clue, I think.
For sure.
I'll just say one of the things I wouldn't mind changing in the Mastiff is the fluffed ears. I would love it if my dogs were born with standing ears. I think it's more useful. The problem is, to do that with regular breeding is very, very difficult. Like, you'd have to breed in so much of everything else that you'd lose everything the Mastiff is by the time you got it. When you try to put the Mastiff back, it would just go, the flopped ears are so dominant. Even in breeds that have standing ears, they have to work to maintain them. So that might be something I could change with CRISPR one day. Just edit
Right.
that one gene without having to introduce German Shepherd or something like that.
I gotcha. Let me ask you this. What do you feed your dogs?
Nothing special. So one of the things I look for a lot is I want it to be easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't want to have to condition my dogs. I don't want to have to feed them a special diet. I don't want any of that. I don't want to have to raise them in a certain way, very particularly so that they'll work. I don't want any of that. So I try to input, and this will sound crazy, as little as possible. And I recommend anybody that gets for a dog from me, input as much as possible because you'll get the best results. But I want the ones that succeed despite the fact that I don't feed them the best food. Now, I do feed them a good food. It's not Old Roy or anything. It's a hunting dog food, and it's got a decently high fat content because they have high calorie needs. And with the Dane blood, they don't get fat easily. At least most of them. Some of them do with a lot of neo in them.
Mm-hmm.
But so for the most part, I'm feeding them Southern Select. Now, once upon a time, I did feed them raw, and that does work better. They look better. But I want the ones that just look cut all the time, regardless whether I, feed them any brands and any, amount of exercise and anything like that. I want them to just look great all the time because it's in their genes, not because I run them on a treadmill 10 hours a day and feed them perfect food. One of these days, I do want to take one and raise them after generations of that and feed them the best of everything, and then exercise them and really find out what the peak is. But as a breeder, I'm more interested in what the bottom is. Like, what's the minimum? What's the least required to get so you still get results out of? And then later on, what's the most? What's the peak? That's like what you can reach. But I wanna push the bottom up as close to the peak as possible. So if the bottom is high, the peak is super high. And, that's what the breeder should be focused on, is what's the least you will produce, and constantly finding the bottom and raising the lower bar. And the owner's job is to find the top.
Let the genetics alone do the talking for you.
Exactly.
I got you.
Exactly. And then I can find who's got the best genes, and you can find who's the best training and diet and all that stuff will produce on top of that. It's like the game pit world or like the racing dog world, massive selection over a long period of time with minimized input for the most part. Dogs which I don't do, that's what those guys do. I'm definitely not like, well, you didn't, you get to eat this week because you won the race or whatever. But,
right.
I do want to find out, because I don't want to produce a high maintenance dog. I'm like anybody else. I want it easy. I don't want a dog that drools all the time. I don't want a dog that sheds all the time. I don't want a dog that needs any kind of special care any more than you would do if you just went to the pound, got you a Labrador, and he was just your buddy. I don't want to have to do a whole bunch of extra. Because I'm like everybody. I've got a busy life. I want a dog to just come the way it's supposed to be, as close as I can get it. And of course, there's always work to be done, and what you put in them, but I want to make sure that I have something that requires some constant input to maintain some minimum standard.
I don't think I asked you this. How long have you been breeding bandogs?
2008 or something like that. So 12 years, something like that.
I gotcha.
12 years, 15 years maybe.
What does the future hold? Do you have any goals lined up as far as your program?
Well, my biggest goal is to get the genetic engineering stuff working. If I can get that where it's reliable, and then I've got some stuff to deal with the FDA and federal government. But if I get through all of that, my biggest goal is to, see where the limits of basically flesh and bone are. And I know that sounds like a big thing, but right now, if I just want to use regular, artificial selection, I'm limited to the genes available in the dog, right? But like GFP, for example, it's a jellyfish gene. So with genetic engineering, you're not limited to the genes of the dog. And you're not even limited to the genes available in nature, which is a whole different conversation. There's this thing called synthetic biology. But you can make dogs that live longer. They've already done that in mice. You can make dogs that have stronger hearts. Like, I was reading a paper today about they used some giraffe genes and put them in mice and made the mice resistant to high blood pressure. So
Wow.
you can make dogs with better circulatory systems. You can make dogs who were born stronger. You can make dogs who were born with better endurance than any dog. You can make dogs that were that live longer. They're born immune to parvo. All this stuff is possible. Like in China last year, or no, year before last, there were 3 babies born that were genetically engineered to be resistant to HIV. Like the fact that all this has dogs, but it's already starting in humans is crazy. And dogs are kind of lagging behind for some reason.
Yeah, you would think it would start there.
Yeah. And some people are working in that direction, and, that guy went to jail because they were like, he shouldn't have done it yet, He kind of jumped the curve that they wanted, but the technology there. And that's the main thing. Regardless of what the laws and regulations are, the technology is there. And that's what really matters because, for example, the agouti gene, right? It creates the fawn pattern and some other yellow-based patterns. And in different species, it creates different patterns. The same gene creates leopard spots or tiger stripes, just a different version. And there was a type of cat, like an Asian leopard cat, and they crossbred it with domestic cats and then bred it back into domestic cat. So now they have domestic cats with these leopard spots. And that same gene exists on dogs. So it's entirely possible you could just translate that over to dogs and have a leopard spotted dog. Or any other traits you can think of. Resistance to poison, like a naked mole rat has, or excuse me, like a mongoose has. Or resistance to cancer, like a naked mole rat has. Or resistance to so many diseases. So repairing all the genetic diseases is just the beginning. Then you can make a dog who goes above and beyond what resistant to infectious diseases. And then a dog who goes above and beyond anything we could select for. Because the history of dog breeding has been taking the best you got, waiting for nature to randomly produce something a little bit better, and then trying to capture that. You don't necessarily have to wait for nature. You can just do it yourself. That's where the technology is, and it's crazy. But that's where we are, and that's kind of what I really want to focus on, is building that pathway by making, better dogs than I ever could have bred the normal way to show people the possibilities. I want to make a dog like nobody's ever seen before so that when it's all said and done, other people can come up and say, how do I do that? Or at least, how do I get a piece of that and bring it into my line? Because at that point, you can just breed it into whatever. But still, the real message, I think, is breeding technology hasn't really changed significantly in 40,000 years.
Right.
We've been breeding dogs since the Ice Age, the same way we do it today. What other thing do we do in the same way we did since the Ice Age, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't live in caves, we don't hunt for stone spears, but we still just pick the best ones and breed them together. And so I think while that's gotten us a long way, it's not the future. And I want to see where that technology can take us. I want to see what modern dog breeding really could look like.
Wow, now you got my brain just
I know, right?
Yeah. I mean, if I was to sit here
happened to me in
customize a dog.
2015. Exactly. So that's what happened to me in 2015. Is when I first found out about this stuff, my brain just exploded. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about it since. And that's what sort of sent me on this journey.
So end game, if you were to customize a dog, what would you change?
Oh, man.
That's a huge question, I imagine.
It depends on what the dog's for, right? It depends on what the dog's for. There's a lot of genes I'd be interested in. First of all, easy stuff to throw away. Longer lifespans on the Mastiff. The short lifespan thing is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. That's That's something we can fix. Like wolves that size live longer than they do, but there's something that we broke that we just don't know what it is. So if we can find what that is and fix it, it's easy. That one, nobody should argue there. But then things like cancer resistance, infectious disease resistance, all that stuff, easy. Nobody's going to argue with that. Maybe a little bit bigger. I don't know. I'm a big, we talked about on the thing in Lee about finding that balance point. But that balance point has a lot to do with where the endurance and things like that fall. But there's animals on this planet that have extraordinary endurance. They'll have like specific genetic changes to give them extreme features in one direction or another. So if you could collect not just the best genes in the dog, but the best genes in mammals, or even broader, put them into one animal that had extraordinary athletic performance and heat tolerance and things like that, you could make a bigger dog without taking the loss. So you're just getting more power and more speed and more endurance and more agility. And, while with this, you're just twisting the dials up and down and everything has a cost. Once you go outside that, you can start getting a hold of things that were never an option before and just crank the dials up. Now, the question is, at what point is it too much? Like, too much to live with? You'll never have that knob that you're free of. But, there's also completely crazy things. Like, there's mammals with scales, like the pangolin.
Right.
And it's really just modified hair. You could have a dog with scales, kind of like a flexible armadillo kind of thing, that can cut resistance. I mean, there's all kinds of options if you really get to looking at sort of what's just in the world, especially even if you limit yourself just to mammals. It's crazy. There's really no limit. But I think what we'll see is an explosion of diversity in the dog breeds, and you'll see new traits introduced for dogs bred for sighthounds. Sighthounds will have new things that they never had before. Mastiffs will have new things they never had before. Bulldogs have new things they never had before. Any dog that's got a function will have new things brought in from other species that will enhance their ability to do that function. Just like we would have captured if it had just mutated in the dog,
Just thinking of all this, like, imagine, the size that Great Danes can be. Imagine a dog that height. And just ripped, huge, chiseled, with heat tolerance. Like, my goodness.
And you look at nature and you say, oh man, a 300-pound dog can't move. But a 300-pound tiger can jump 13 feet.
Right.
So flesh and bone can do it. But it's just a matter of building it the right way. And the genes to do it may not exist in the dog. But that doesn't mean they don't exist. It doesn't mean they can't exist in the dog.
This interview is definitely going to have probably a part 2 and a part 3. And
Awesome.
So who would you say your best dog is right now?
Best dog in my yard that's proven, I'd say Osiris. But there's a lot of blood down from him, his sons and grandsons, that have yet to be proven. So once they, are matured and tested, we'll see. I'm hoping that I'm making improvements, But until you, put them through it, you don't know. Training and assessment. I feel like, let's go out to the trainer and let's put some meat on the dog. Let's see how they do. See if they'll really engage and bite when they're challenged. And let's see if they'll take pressure. And let's see, those sorts of things. And then other things, I'll run them to test for their speed and their agility and that sort of thing. So there's a lot that goes into it. And testing really starts at 5 weeks, but, it doesn't really conclude until they're about 2 or 3 years old.
I gotcha. So how do you select a puppy that will eventually be a good protection dog?
Well, the first thing for selecting puppies is selecting their parents, of course. But afterward, when they get about 5 weeks old, I have a whole series of puppy tests that I do for the next 3 weeks, so between 5 and 8 weeks, and I'm looking for things like, I test things like sure-footedness and noise sensitivity and things like that, because that gives me an indication of their nerves, like how they process stress, because stress isn't a terrible thing. But how they process it is really, really critical, because like if a dog takes stress and processes it, and then the next time you come back, the stress is, that stimulus is no longer stressful. They've raised the threshold on that. Then that's a dog that'll grow. That's a dog that won't be like a nerve bag. But if a dog doesn't, or they get worse, the more of that stimulus they see, the more stressed out they become about it. It's just this vicious cycle, and that dog is just going to have nerve problems. And so you got to select, and that's something you can select early. And it manifests in a lack of sure-footedness and sensitivity to noise and those sorts of things. But also, I test them based on how well they respond defensively around 7 or 8 weeks, because they actually will. They usually need like an external kick, like they'll need like their mom to bark at somebody suspicious, because they don't. Like, I'm not even sure how much they understand about the world. They see a person walking around in a new way. They don't necessarily understand it's connected as a suspicious way, but they know instinctively when their mom barks that defensive bark, that that's something to react to. Yeah. And I want to see how they react. Do they flee? Do they stand their ground? Do they step forward, bark? What kind of, like when the puppy is thinking about himself and he's thinking, how do I respond? How do I assess the situation? Am I the kind of dog that just will step up to a challenge even when I may not even know what that challenge is? Or my dog is going to shrink from a challenge right off the bat. So all those kind of tests, and it's done repeatedly, and there's lots of different tests. But and then physical tests as well, like to make sure that they're sound and the joints are good and stuff. But as far as their ability to meet the role, prey drive, good threshold, defense drive with a good threshold. Too much is still too much. Too little is obviously too little. So there's a balance that you have to strike there. And I kind of rank them based on what role I think they would suit best. So if sort of all the knobs are high, I call that a personal protection type dog. They've got a lot of prey drive, low defense, or high defense threshold. I think of more of the working type dog, which is more bulldog minded really. And if it's high defense or low defense threshold and low prey drive, more like a Mastiff mind. So defense type dog, and I'll call those guard dogs. And
I gotcha.
So that's kind of how I sort them. I tend to, depending on the breeding, but I tend to produce more guard type than anything else, and that's kind of expected since I have a lot of Mastiff blood. So Mastiff type traits tend to manifest. But I produce a good bit of what I consider to be a personal protection type dog, which has a good balance between the two. And that's what I select for my personal thing. Most people really want a guard type dog. Like you're just well, he may not do great on the training field because he doesn't have great prey drive. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't mean when somebody comes looking for trouble, he's not going to do something. And depending on the trainer, you bring that out. You can use the defense side of a Mastiff to bring that out. The Mastiff, it's just defense. A lot of people don't like defense because dogs have to have a lot of courage to work in defense because he's working under stress the whole time. He really thinks he's in a fight for death, Right. And so he has to have the courage to stay in that fight. And that's hard to do. Prey is a lot easier. He feels like he's a hunter. He's not in danger. Balance is hard because it requires courage. And a lot of defense with no prey to give him stress relief is even more courage. And so you have to have a really high courage dog to work in defense. But if you've got that, then you got a dog that for the most part will sleep on your couch, chill out, ignore the neighbor's cat. But if somebody's sneaking in your window in the middle of the night with a ski mask on, bite them in the face.
Right.
That's what most people are looking for.
That makes
because
sense.
A lot of people get dogs with high prey drive thinking they want a personal protection dog, and they're like, they don't realize how much work prey drive really is. Or the dog is going to be like harassing the neighbor's dog or harassing the neighbor's cat or anything that moves. And a really high prey drive dog is a lot of work.
Yeah, for sure. I've had my share of pit bulls that, I mean, just go, 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 go. I'm like, dude, chill.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm a pretty laid back person. I don't want a dog I've got to entertain. Like,
Right.
I'll pet you. But let's just chill out. I've had a hard day at work. Let's lay down.
Right.
Relax a little bit.
Well, that's pretty much all the questions I had for today. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
No. We'll save a little something for part 2.